Hi everyone, Chris is my name. I work with Reconciliation Tasmania, and whilst we have a busy year normally, this year is extra busy because we're now heading towards the Voice referendum, which is likely to be sometime in the middle of October. So Alison mentioned at the start about our barometer, which you'll see on the screen. Has everybody had a chance to think about where they are sitting in terms of their information levels at the moment? How do I find anything out?
There's a couple of responses there, Chris. I think if we just get started, because there's further just exploration of this as we go through.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for participating in our Understanding the Voice workshop, which we are running online for the first time. And Alison, who you can see on screen, has done an awful amount of work to make sure that this can happen. So thank you, Alison. Basically, our work over the next few months is trying to inform as many Tasmanians as possible about the Voice to Parliament proposal, the referendum, and the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which is the source and the request from First Nations Australians. So without moving forward in the workshop, we should do acknowledgement of country. Ken, how do you feel about reading the acknowledgement of country out today?
Yeah, sure. We acknowledge that the Palawa and Pakana, is it, of Lutruwita, Tasmania, as the traditional owners and continuing custodians of the land on which each of us is participating in today's workshop. We pay respects to elders past, present, and present, and to any Aboriginal people participating today.
Thank you, Ken. So today's workshop is very interactive and will run for roughly an hour. We've done our temperature check. And as you can see, there are three main sections to the workshop, which is about our timeline, the Uluru Statement, and the referendum itself. As Alison has already mentioned, if you have any burning questions at any point in the workshop, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them at some point in the workshop. So the whole idea of the workshop is not to suggest how you should vote. It's about providing understanding and clarity so that you can make an informed choice on referendum day. And we feel that that's the least you can do to show the respect to the requests that have been made by First Nations Australians for a voice to Parliament and beyond. So we've got a few ground rules for today's workshop, which I'll just run through now. So obviously, let's not be distracted by our phones. You can put them away or turn them on silent if you can. And next point is really important, to be open to learning from others and understanding that we all have different perspectives and come from different levels of experience. We all need to listen and not talk over each other. And this next point is, in this sort of space, is very important to just be careful not to think about what you say before you say it. There may be people carrying all different sorts of feelings about what we're talking about. And obviously questions encouraged at any time. Please, this is exactly what the workshop is about. And yeah, understanding that we've all got a voice in this as well. How does that sound? Is everybody happy to agree by those?
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, let's move on. I think Alison might be able to give us bit of an indication about where everybody is on the barometer?
Yeah, so most people are showing up in the middle, and so far we don't have any burning questions.
Right. Okay. Onwards and upwards, as they say. Okay, so in the materials that you've been sent, you should have this timeline,
On pages
which
2 and 3 of the PDF.
the one side of the timeline goes back into deep time, and then obviously has a more concentrated emphasis on Tasmania and Australia's more recent history since the arrival of Europeans. And then on the other side, or the second page, is some key events that have happened since 2007. So what we'll do now, I think, is Alison about to take everybody into breakout rooms?
Yep, that's right. So there'll be 2 breakout rooms, I think, with the number of people that we have. You'll be able to have a conversation about the 2 documents. You'll have a little bit of time to have a read of them if you haven't already, and just sharing your reflections with each other in the breakout rooms, talking about what jumped out at you, anything that you learned from the 2 pages there. And we'll send you a message with about a 1-minute warning when we're going to bring you back. And then you'll get a link saying the breakout room's going to close shortly. So when that happens, if you can just please say, yep, I'll go back into the main meeting, and then we'll all be back together.
Fantastic. I'll set a timer for 7 minutes. Away we go. Thank you. Alison,
Yep.
I think I accidentally jumped out of the meeting.
No, you're still in it.
breakout.
No,
I'm
no,
still
you're
in
right.
it.
Yep. Do you want to join? I was just about to text you. Do you want to join room 2 and I'll join room 1?
Well, I had joined room 2, but I think I pressed something and went out of it.
You should be able to still go in, I reckon.
Wow.
Do you have an
Do you want
option?
me to just stay in here?
Sure.
Breakout
Thanks,
rooms. Wait a
Lauren.
minute. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Join.
You're right, Chris. So I'll jump into room 1.
I've got it now. I've got it now.
Great.
Is it going okay? Oh, you're on mute, Alison.
Yeah, one of the guys couldn't find the handout, so I was screen sharing, but I'm just going to drop it into the chat now so everybody's got
yeah.
it.
Okay.
Yeah. To meeting group chat. No, it won't let me do that.
Won't let you put it in the chat.
No, are you able to do that for us, please, Lauren?
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, file. I'll just save the file on my desk drive and then send it.
Thank you. Hi, Dakota. Welcome into the workshop. We're just in breakout rooms at the moment, but we'll be back in a whole group in just a second. So we'll be able to bring you in and get you involved, Dakota, in the next part.
Right. Do
Just
we
got
have
a couple-
everyone?
We've just
Sorry?
got room one's not back yet, Chris.
Okay, no worries.
And we've got Dakota has just jumped online. So Dakota will catch up when we get into the next activity.
Yeah. Fantastic name.
Chris, did you want to share your screen again? We don't have your PowerPoint slides visible now.
Easy. Yep. How's that? Got it.
Yep, thank you.
Alison.
Yes,
I'm
Lauren.
not able to put it in the chat either, so maybe if the person can just provide their email, I can send it to them if you like.
Oh, sure. It was for no, it wasn't Siobhan. It was for Alex Mel.
Alex, do you mind just sending your email address directly to the TCCI host if you like?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, we've got everybody back from the breakout rooms.
Right. Thanks, Alison. How did everybody go in the breakout rooms? How were the discussions? And we might have about 5 minutes now to have a little bit of a discussion, and we'll start with room one. Is there somebody who would like to share what your conversation was about and any reflections from the timeline?
I think I was in room one, so I'm happy to share some reflections. I think the amount of information distilled in these pages is actually quite impressive. There is a lot of history and a lot of activity that is captured succinctly. So I think it's nice to have that kind of aid. I think it's also quite interesting, particularly on the second page, just how bipartisan the progression has been. It hasn't been sort of aligned to particular political interests. So I thought that was quite an interesting thing, because I think today it feels a little bit polarized. I'm not saying it's entirely that way, but it does feel less so when you read that Road to Uluru and Beyond.
Yeah. And room two, I think Ken's going to speak for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a few questions about things and we answered those pretty well. As I said, my concern was about how much control to executive government they have. Like, The way I sort of interpreted it was they were going to be sitting around the cabinet table with the government of the day. It seems like it's no different to what it is now, and it'll be just a person talking to the minister from whichever government it would be, which is what it is now. And I think that's great. That's answered my question. That was really the main concern I had. We had other concerns about, just different things with the, like I looked at the timeline there, and like, I don't know if anyone's ever been to Wyballina, and you go to that place, it's a sad spot, and it's where a white man tried to put all the blacks in to become white people, and they died of basically white issues. And then when you go through that timeline, the early timeline, you just see how every government started something for the Aboriginals, then the next one cancels it. And, then Hawke abolishes the national average, and then the next one I start another one. And I think this is some permanence where we definitely, the government can't get rid of the body, because it doesn't matter who's in. Because if you think about it, every time someone comes in, someone else changes it, and this is now it's stuck in the mud once it's there, and we have to get it right. So otherwise, it's not going to be, you can't change it. But I think from everything we've just discussed for our group, it's certainly looking like it's going to be quite a good thing.
Anybody else like to make any other reflections? I think you made a very good point there, Ken, about the kind of inconsistency that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have had in the way that they've worked with government. And one of the other conversations we had in our group was that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are effectively the only group, specific group of people that the government does make specific laws for. And I think this all goes to the heart of why, when we do our next exercise, which is reading the Uluru Statement, you'll see that they specifically ask for a voice to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution. So what they are seeking is that permanency. And the reason for that permanency is to be able to not have the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and communities around the country affected by the whim of government, so that they can actually build to improve their lot, really, in a more permanent way. And as we also said, create a step in the right direction towards truth-telling and treaty. So how about we move on to our next exercise, for which we will need some volunteers.
So Chris, we've currently got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 participants in the meeting, and I can see Sharon's got a friend with her. So you and I might have to share a little bit of the reading as well. But if everybody's happy to do a reading, if I tell you which number slide is yours, the slides have numbers on them as well. So Chris, if you'd like to be number 1, I'm just going by the order that the videos are showing up on my screen. Ken, if you're able to please be number 2. Sharon, could you be number 3 and your friend be number 4? Alex, number 5, Siobhan, number 6, Dakota, number 7, and I'll be number 8. Are we all clear? Give me a thumbs up emoji if you're clear on that.
Yeah,
oh, Dakota hasn't got a mic. Okay, Dakota, Chris, you be number 7 as well as number 1, okay?
Okay.
Yep.
Can I just ask first, and maybe we can have a nod or an emoji. Who has read the Uluru Statement before?
No, I've never read it.
I can't see all the responses there.
We mostly haven't got responses, but Ken said no. But let's get into it and then everybody can have a read.
Yeah, all right, let's get going. Okay, so I'll get going. We gathered at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, make this statement from the heart.
Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of Australian continent and its adjacent islands, and proposed it under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did, according to the reckoning of our culture, from the creation, according to the common law, from time immemorial, and according to science, more than 60,000 years ago.
This sovereignty is a spiritual notion. The ancestral tie between the land or Mother Nature and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom remain attached thereto and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished and coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown.
How could it be otherwise? That peoples possessed a land for 60 millennia, and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years. With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood.
Proportionally, we're the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are alien from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them, and our youth language in detention in obscene numbers. There should be a hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness.
We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. We will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution.
Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise the process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history.
In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future.
Well done, everybody.
It's
It's 440 words across 12 paragraphs. And as we have just read then, it's really in 3 sections. So obviously the first section is about connection to country and sovereignty. The middle section is about the dimensions of the ongoing crisis in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. The third part is their solution for a better Australia and an invitation for us to join them. And 2 requests. 2 requests are obviously a voice to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution and the creation of a Makarrata Commission. Now, you might have heard of this expressed differently. So it's sometimes expressed as voice, treaty and truth. The other way to express it, as it is in the Uluru Statement, is voice and Makarrata. Now, Makarrata is a Yolngu word from far northeast Arnhem Land, and it means coming together after a struggle and agreement making. So that's why they've used that word. So I believe now that we're going to head back into our groups, and I'll let Alison take over.
Thanks, Chris. That's right. So in your handouts, it's on pages, I think it's pages 4 and 5 of your handouts. You have a copy of the Uluru Statement. And on page 4 is the Uluru Statement in full, and page 5 has some thinking questions if you need some thinking prompts for your discussions. So I'm going to send you all into rooms again, and we'll have probably about 10 to 15 minutes in your rooms to discuss it. And again, I'll call you back in when it's time to come back. Dakota, if your mic's not working, perhaps the people in your room, if they can put the chat up, then you can put your discussion comments and questions into the chat for them to read. So I'm going to open all the rooms now. Chris, do you want to go into room 2 again?
Yeah, I'll go into room 2. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't see an invitation.
You should have the option to, oh, sorry, I'll assign you. Done. You good?
Yep.
Great. I reckon the other group's just taking their time with their last 60 seconds of the room working. Good to
Okay,
have everyone back, Chris.
I need to
We've
share my
lost
screen
your
again.
video. Oh, there you are.
Right. How did everybody go?
Good.
So we had a great question from Siobhan, which happened right at the end. So I asked him to pause it to share with the group, Chris. So perhaps if Siobhan's happy to share his question.
Yeah, just to declare, I'm just a newly minted citizen, so I'm a migrant to Australia. So I'm trying to, thank you. Trying to understand, what's been done before. So I come from a highly technical background, and I'm just trying to figure out like a root cause analysis. Did this issue's been going on from the timeline? My understanding is it's not a new problem. It's a problem that's historic, and obviously there's been elements and processes been put in place to mitigate it in some form or to support a solution journey. So is there any understanding of why those solution journeys didn't work, or what worked, what didn't work? Why didn't we try? Is there anything that has worked versus didn't work, and what didn't work? Has that been fixed in that sense, rather than just throw the whole thing away and then try something else altogether? So that understanding element is something I don't know or see, or do not know where to look for in that way. And just understanding that, and then figuring out what actually happens on the ground. So this is a very broad level, high level thing. And my simplistic brain's going, how are we going to tackle this on the ground level and make quick win changes? Or, how do you go about translating statements into action items on the ground to actually make change, become an active agent of change? I mean, this will be a starting point, but I'm looking down the road, obviously, on the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, thanks, Siobhan. Chris, did you want to answer that one, or do you want me to have a go?
Why don't we both have a go?
Sure.
I'll just go back to, if you go into the forward part of Siobhan's question, the last bit, Alison, just to go backwards, looking at the inconsistencies. I basically think that governments have had different commitment to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs, and many have wanted to make their own mark, and that has resulted in a very inconsistent approach to Aboriginal affairs, which they now believe has been a great setback to their communities. And we also have to remember that it's not so long ago that there were many discriminatory policies towards Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, family removal, go back to right up until the 1950s, most Aboriginal people were sent to missions to live. So there was, within the kind of, this also has to be remembered that it was often going on within the context of the White Australia policy. So the goal of governments at that time was to assimilate all people, not just Aboriginal people, but other groups of people too, who maybe have come to Australia after World War II, to try and, I don't know what they were trying to create, but obviously the White Australia policy was removed in the 1960s. And in 1967, at the referendum there was the first great leap in Aboriginal relations in terms of recognition, being counted in the consensus, in the census. Okay, Alison?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and so I guess for Siobhan, especially being a migrant to Australia, so until the 1967 referendum, Aboriginal people weren't actually counted as citizens in their own country. They couldn't vote. They mostly didn't have, there were a lot of state laws in place that they had to get permission from the protector of Aborigines to be allowed to marry, to be allowed to move to a different part of the state. Their wages, if they were paid at all, were sequestered by government and held in trust for them because they were treated as wards of the state. So there was this really systemic disempowerment and disenfranchisement, and really they weren't full citizens. They were treated like minors, like children would be, who are in the guardianship of the state, not as adults in their own right. And as Chris said, with the White Australia policy, the goal was really to sort of turn everybody into white Australians and, erase their own culture and practices and beliefs and values. When following the 67 referendum, the other key change that happened as a result of that was that the Commonwealth government acquired legislative power in relation to Aboriginal people. But as Chris said, there's been mixed levels of interest in it and also willingness to listen to Aboriginal people as opposed to coming in and telling them what they need. And so the request for the voice in the Uluru Statement is really saying, well, we want to have a say in decisions that affect us, because historically they haven't really had one, and certainly not in a systemic and structured way. So in terms of what it looks like going forward, some of the real success stories in Australia have been things like the Aboriginal community controlled health organisations. So in the COVID response, for example, when COVID first hit in 2020, the Aboriginal community controlled health organisations went to federal government and said, we need to be able to run COVID in our communities. And out of all of the countries in the world, most of them had really significant death rates among Indigenous populations, and Australia actually had a lower death rate among the Aboriginal communities than we did among our non-Aboriginal communities, despite there being really significant risk factors in those communities with people with chronic health conditions and things like that. So that was a really good example of where Aboriginal input into decision making has a real impact on the ground. And sadly, we saw the reverse of that happen when the decision was made to start opening borders and reopening communities, and there wasn't enough consultation or involvement with those Aboriginal community leaders. We saw some really significant outbreaks happen, particularly in Western New South Wales, in the later stages of the pandemic, so it was really reversed. In terms of how the voice would work on the ground, there's been a lot of work done on that by Marcia Langton and Tom Calma under the previous government, and they have published 2 reports which look at how would there be local and regional groups providing grassroots perspectives, and how will they link up to the national voice. So there is a lot of work. There's sort of 200-odd page reports that have been developed with deep consultation with Aboriginal people across Australia to identify how this would work in practice. But basically the idea is there will be local bodies, regional bodies and national bodies, all of which will be representative, selected by the relevant communities, and so that the national body will be able to provide a voice to the federal government and the federal parliament at that level, but it will be informed by all the different layers below. So it really is that grassroots-led perspective. Chris, I'm not sure, we don't have a lot of time left in our session. We've got about 5 minutes. Did you want to wrap up this part of the conversation and move on to the last part, or did we want to just check if there's any other questions or reflections? I'll leave it over to Chris.
Maybe we should ask the question if everybody is able to stay 5 or so minutes more past 11 o'clock. Do you need an emoji for that?
We've
Alison?
got quite a few shaking of heads going on there, Chris.
All right,
unfortunately, people have got other meetings to go to, I think.
All right, that's good. All right, well, let's move on. We'll move on. Unless there's any other burning question.
No,
Okay.
shaking of heads again.
All right. So who has seen the question that will go to be asked at the referendum?
We've got
Yeah.
one nod and 2 nods.
2 nods. Okay, so I'll read it out if you like. A proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve of this proposed alteration? So it's not a tick a box question. It is you'll need to write a yes or a no. Now, is anybody not clear on why we need to go to a referendum to change the constitution?
Some shaking of heads.
As shaking of heads as in not clear? Or everybody's clear?
Alex, that was you shaking heads. Did you have your understanding why we have to have a referendum? Yep, great. I think we can go to the next slide, Chris.
Right. So obviously, the forefathers of Australia that created the Constitution made it difficult to change. So they made it difficult to change for a very good reason. You don't want to be changing your Constitution every week, obviously. And the way that they did this was to create the referendum system, which means that if you want to introduce something to a constitution, our constitution, you need to go to a referendum. And similarly, if you want to remove something from constitution, you also need to go to a referendum. So it does create permanency. And what is required to pass a referendum is the national vote, and that is counted twice. So the first vote is a majority of all of the people of Australia. And the second vote is, sorry?
Need to jump to your next slide, Chris. Sorry, you haven't got the double majority slide
I'm
showing.
I'm the only one looking at it. So here we are. It's displayed beautifully here. Is a majority of states. So we need to get a 50.1% of Australian people for the overall vote, and we need 4 states. And obviously, what comes up in a lot of these workshops is why aren't the territories counted as in that state count? Well, obviously that's a historical fact, and to change that, we would also need to go to another referendum. So in this particular case, it is, yeah, it's maybe a little bit unfair, especially because the population of the Northern Territory is 50% Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander.
So don't they vote at all? They don't vote at all?
No, they do vote. They do vote. It's just that their vote is counted for the overall vote rather than as a separate territory. Yeah. So in Tasmanian sense, we actually occupy a fairly special position in that our vote is worth more, for example, than say somebody from New South Wales, because it not technically, but kind of in effect it is really, because we only have 400,000 registered voters rather than 8 million or so. So obviously that's why there is a lot of attention being paid on Tasmania by both the yes and the no campaigns in this referendum, and you'll probably be letterboxed and door knocked by both in the weeks and months to come. Alison, you look like you're
just giving you the 11 o'clock warning. We're actually up to time, so we just maybe
right.
need to just quickly.
So does everybody have a clear understanding what we just talked about there?
Yep.
Now, if you need to go, feel free to go. If you have any more burning questions, stay behind, and Alison and I will do our best to answer them.
And Chris, if you could perhaps just jump ahead a couple of slides, just for people who are stepping out.
Yes.
We've just got a slide. Next one. Next one. We just, in your handouts, the last page of your PDF document does have some links there if you want more information, and also just making sure you're enrolled to vote and that your enrolment details are up to date. And also, if any of you would like to book workshops for your organisations, or if you'd like to get involved with helping Reconciliation Tasmania with delivering workshops like this, please do get in touch, and those details are all in your PDF handouts. So yeah, thank you very much everyone for participating today. I'll hand back to Chris to close us out.
Yeah, as Alison said, thanks very much. It's a great commitment that you've shown to learn about the Voice to Parliament, this very important moment in Australia's history. And look, over the next, as the grey point there, point 2 says, please have those conversations with people around you. It's really important that we're all trying to understand this, and the best thing that you can do, as you have displayed, is be informed on the day. So I'll close this off, but if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to stay behind.